This deep-sea dwelling oarfish was captured alive off the coast of Japan. It's 2.2 meters long and weighs 12.4 kilograms. Locals call it the Phantom of the Deep.
Have you ever wondered what kind of creature inspired centuries of sea monster legends, survives by chopping off its own tail, and has been called a messenger from the gods? Scientists have spent decades trying to understand this animal, and the more they learn, the more baffling it becomes. The oarfish is the longest bony fish on Earth, yet almost everything about how it lives, moves, feeds, and even dies defies what science expects from a creature of its size. Every new discovery raises more questions than it answers. The strange and extraordinary body of the oarfish. When most people hear the word fish, a familiar picture forms in their minds. Something with scales, fins on the sides, a tail for propulsion, and a body shaped for slicing through water. The oarfish tears every part of that picture apart. Scientifically classified as Regalecus glesni, the giant oarfish holds the official title of the longest bony fish alive on Earth today, a distinction backed by the Guinness Book of World Records. Documented specimens have been confirmed at lengths of up to 8 meters, which is roughly 26 feet, though unverified reports have described individuals stretching to 11 meters or 36 feet, weighing as much as 272 kilograms or 600 pounds. To put that in perspective, that is roughly the length of 2 full-sized sedans parked bumper to bumper, all belonging to a single living animal. Yet despite that extraordinary size, almost nothing about the body of an oarfish follows the rules that govern other large fish. Start with the skin. While every other large fish in the ocean is covered with scales, the oarfish has none at all. In place of scales, the body is coated with a layer of silvery guanine crystals, the same molecule that gives certain beauty products their pearlescent shimmer. According to the Florida Museum of Natural History, the scaleless body is covered with silver to silvery blue skin marked with blotches and wavy patterns, with no protective armor beyond this thin guanine coating. That makes the skin surprisingly delicate for such a massive animal. When oarfish are removed from the deep ocean and brought to the surface, the skin is easily torn and abraded because it is built for the crushing pressure of the deep sea, not the relatively gentle conditions above. The dorsal fin is another feature that sets this creature entirely apart. In most fish, the dorsal fin sits on top of the back and is used for stability. In the oarfish, the dorsal fin runs along the entire length of the body, from directly above the eyes all the way to where the tail tapers off, containing approximately 400 individual fin rays. The first 10 to 13 of those rays are elongated well beyond the others, forming a dramatic crest above the head that is decorated with reddish spots and flaps of skin at the tips of each ray. In some descriptions, this crimson crest has been compared to a flaming headdress or a crown. Researchers at sea who have glimpsed oarfish in the wild describe the crest as rippling gently in the current, creating an almost regal visual effect, which likely explains why the family name Regalesidae comes from the Latin word for royal. And yet, for all that ornamental drama, the oarfish has no caudal fin to speak of. Most fish rely on a tail fin for their primary thrust through water. The oarfish either has a drastically reduced caudal fin or none at all, with the body tapering to a fine point. There is also no anal fin whatsoever. The oarfish propels itself entirely through the undulation of its long dorsal fin while holding the body relatively straight, a style of movement known as amyoform locomotion, a method so unusual that the first scientists who observed it alive needed time to process what they were watching. The mouth adds yet another layer of strangeness to this already bizarre anatomy. It is small relative to the size of the animal, and it contains no visible teeth. Instead of hunting and biting prey the way most large fish do, the oarfish is a filter feeder. It strains zooplankton, krill, small crustaceans, shrimp, jellyfish, and small squid from the water using specially adapted gill rakers inside the mouth, essentially functioning like a giant living sieve. One captured specimen found off the coast of California was found to have ingested roughly 10,000 individual krill in a single feeding event, a stomach content that revealed a voracious appetite for tiny creatures despite the animal's enormous proportions. Then, there is the issue of the swim bladder, or rather, the complete absence of one. Most bony fish use a swim bladder as a buoyancy organ, inflating or deflating it with gas to control their position in the water column without expending energy on constant swimming. The oarfish has no swim bladder at all. Without this organ, the fish must use active physical effort to maintain its depth, relying on its continuously rippling dorsal fin to keep itself positioned correctly in the water column. Scientists believe this contributes to the vertical swimming posture frequently observed in the species, a behavior covered in more detail later in this script. One of the most medically bizarre adaptations in the oarfish involves self-amputation. Known as autotomy, this is the deliberate shedding of part of the body. According to Wikipedia's entry on autotomy, the giant oarfish shows clear evidence of self-amputation of the body posterior to the vent, and all fish over 1.5 meters in length have bodies shortened by this process, which can occur several times throughout the fish's lifetime in what is termed serial autotomy. The key detail that makes this especially strange is that the oarfish has no confirmed natural predators. Lizards shed tails to distract attacking animals. Sea cucumbers expel organs to overwhelm threats. But if nothing is hunting the oarfish, what purpose does chopping off its own tail serve? Researchers from the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute have suggested the process may improve swimming efficiency rather than serving as a defensive mechanism. Since the vital organs of the oarfish are all concentrated in the front half of the body, losing the back section causes no damage to any critical system. The wound heals, but the tail does not grow back, meaning the animal carries through life with a permanently shortened body after each amputation event. Scientists continue to debate what evolutionary pressure drove this behavior, and no definitive answer has emerged so far. There is one final structural detail that deserves attention before moving deeper into what scientists have learned about this creature's life. Hyperossified bones have been documented in several oarfish washed up on the coast of California. Bony rays that run along the entire dorsal length of the body and are believed to provide structural support during undulation, while also preventing stress fractures that might otherwise occur from the forces generated by the dorsal fin's constant movement. A fish that can voluntarily remove its own rear end has no scales, no teeth, no swim bladder, no tail fin, no anal fin, and propels itself entirely through a fin that covers its entire body is already extraordinary. But its behavior in the deep ocean is even more difficult to explain. Now that the anatomy of the oarfish has laid the groundwork, the next piece of this puzzle involves something that has baffled scientists for far longer: how this enormous creature actually lives and moves in one of the least understood environments on Earth. Life in the twilight zone. The oarfish does not live where most ocean creatures live. It makes its home in a region of the ocean known as the mesopelagic zone, sometimes referred to as the twilight zone, which stretches from roughly 200 meters below the surface down to about 1,000 meters. According to AZ Animals, the shallowest waters the oarfish inhabits are around 200 meters below the surface, while confirmed observations have placed specimens at verified depths of 463 to 492 meters, with some records indicating the fish may venture as deep as 1,000 meters or beyond. At those depths, sunlight is reduced to the faintest blue-green glow. Pressure is immense, and the temperature is cold enough to make life challenging for almost any creature. The oarfish is adapted to thrive in exactly those conditions. For most of recorded history, virtually nothing was known about how the oarfish behaved in its natural habitat. Every specimen scientists had ever studied came from individuals that had washed ashore already dead or dying, or had been accidentally entangled in fishing nets. That changed in a significant way in 2001, when a team of United States Navy personnel repairing a buoy in the Bahamas filmed a live oarfish for the first time. That 2001 footage showed the animal swimming by, undulating its long dorsal fin while keeping the body relatively straight, confirming the ammoform mode of locomotion that researchers had theorized based on anatomy alone. The body stayed almost motionless. Only the fin moved, sending a rippling wave along the creature's entire length and driving it slowly through the water. Then, in July 2008, a remotely operated vehicle deployed by scientists in the Gulf of Mexico captured the first footage of an oarfish swimming freely in its natural mesopelagic habitat. The specimen, estimated to be between 5 and 10 meters in length, was observed swimming in a columnar orientation with its tail pointing downward and its head angled upward, a posture completely unlike the horizontal swimming of almost every other fish species. This discovery forced a major rethinking of oarfish behavior. Scientists had assumed the fish would swim horizontally, as most fish do. Instead, it appeared to drift vertically through the water column like a living ribbon suspended from a point above. This vertical posture, sometimes called the elevator posture, appears to serve multiple functions. Researchers suggest that by orienting the body vertically, the oarfish can blend into narrow columns of faint light descending from the surface, making it effectively invisible to predators or prey looking upward from below. The silver guanine covering the scaleless skin reflects and scatters what little light reaches those depths, breaking up the outline of the body and helping the animal disappear into its surroundings, despite being dozens of feet long. It is camouflage achieved not through coloration, but through posture and reflection. The vertical posture also appears to be connected to feeding. Scientists believe the oarfish may adopt this head-up stance to scan downward for the faint silhouettes of bioluminescent prey, using the faint residual glow produced by organisms in the twilight zone to locate food from above. Because the mesopelagic zone is populated by many creatures that produce their own light, an oarfish positioned vertically in the water would have a significant advantage in spotting the glow of krill or small squid drifting below it. A follow-up observation in 2011 added another critical piece of information. Researchers watching footage from remotely operated vehicles documented an oarfish switching between a vertical posture and full lateral swimming using body undulations, proving that the fish is not locked into a single mode of movement. The same 2011 footage revealed something about the oarfish's response to approaching vehicles. The animal showed slow and delayed flight responses, supporting the scientific hypothesis that it has very few, if any, natural predators in its environment. A creature that evolved in the presence of consistent predation pressure would respond to approaching objects with speed and alarm. The oarfish does neither. By 2019, the total number of confirmed oarfish observations recorded by remotely operated vehicles in the Gulf of Mexico from 2008 onward numbered only 5. 5 observations across more than a decade of deep-sea exploration gives a sense of just how difficult it is to find, study, and understand this animal in its natural environment. The Scripps Institution of Oceanography's records show that only about 21 oarfish strandings had been documented along the coast of California since 1901, a span of over 100 years, and even those observations came from animals that were already dead or severely distressed. What the oarfish does during a normal healthy day deep in the twilight zone remains largely a matter of inference and educated guesswork. What is known about reproduction is similarly incomplete. Spawning has been observed off the coast of Mexico between July and December, and the eggs are described as brightly colored, buoyant, and up to 6 millimeters across, released into the water column and incorporated into the zooplankton, where they float freely without any parental care. In 2019, the first successful artificial insemination of oarfish was performed in a laboratory, and the resulting fertilized eggs took approximately 18 days to hatch into larvae. The larvae appeared similar to those of other lampridiform fish, small, delicate creatures that spend their early lives near the ocean's surface, feeding on plankton, before eventually descending into the deep sea as they grow. At what age that descent happens, how long oarfish live, and how they age remain entirely unknown. The picture of the oarfish that emerges from studying its biology is already extraordinary, but for centuries, it was not biology that made this animal famous. It was something far more dramatic, and the science behind it is stranger than most people realize. The sea serpent, the earthquake fish, and the folklore. Long before scientists had names for the oarfish or instruments capable of studying it, coastal peoples around the world were encountering the occasional washed-up body of an enormous silver ribbon-shaped creature crowned with what appeared to be a mane of red flames. The conclusions those encounters inspired were entirely logical, given what anyone could see. This was a sea serpent. This was a monster. This was a messenger from another world. According to Atlas Obscura, the belief in Japan dates back to at least the 17th century, when the oarfish was known as Ryugu no Tsukai, meaning messenger from the sea god's palace, and its appearance near shore was interpreted as a direct communication from the divine realm below the ocean's surface. The fish was not just unusual, it was believed to carry warnings. Those warnings were most commonly understood as predictions of earthquakes. Japanese folklore held that when oarfish appeared in shallow water or washed ashore in numbers, a catastrophic seismic event was coming. The belief might have remained a curiosity confined to folklore, if not for what happened in 2011. Shortly before the catastrophic Tohoku earthquake and tsunami struck Japan in March of that year, approximately 20 oarfish had stranded themselves on beaches in the area in the preceding months, a cluster of appearances that drew immediate global attention and revived the earthquake fish theory with new urgency. The question scientists immediately asked was whether there could be any biological mechanism behind the correlation. Mark Benfield, a researcher at Louisiana State University, noted that some deep-sea fish might be more sensitive to subtle chemical changes in seawater that occur in the period leading up to seismic activity, since they live closer to active fault zones on the ocean floor. Kiyoshi Watatsumi, a specialist in ecological seismology, told the Japan Times that deep-sea fish living near the seafloor are more sensitive to the movements of active faults than species that live close to the surface.
Some researchers have suggested that pre-earthquake geological stress releases gases and changes pressure gradients at depth, potentially disorientating deep-sea animals and driving them upwards.
The hypothesis was that electromagnetic changes, pressure fluctuations, or alterations in ocean chemistry preceding an earthquake could disorient deep-sea fish, causing them to rise to the surface or wash ashore. The theory is compelling and not entirely without scientific foundation. Other animals have been documented behaving unusually before seismic events. Research tracking toad behavior found that toad activity coincided with measurable pre-seismic disturbances in the ionosphere, and various species of animals have been documented evacuating burrows or altering migration routes before major earthquakes. The idea that a creature living close to the seafloor near active fault lines might detect early signals that human instruments currently miss is not scientifically absurd. However, when researchers looked at the actual data on oarfish strandings and earthquake events, the results were much less persuasive than the legend suggested. Analysis of global stranding data has helped challenge the supposed link between oarfish appearances and earthquakes, with scientists noting that the 2011 cluster was circumstantial rather than systematic, and many major earthquakes have occurred with no preceding oarfish strandings at all. The correlation found before the 2011 Tohoku event was real in the sense that both things happened. But correlation is not causation, and the decades of records before and after 2011 do not support a reliable predictive pattern. The folklore around the oarfish also intersects with its physical appearance in another way. In the streamerfish, the related species Agrostishthis parkeri, researchers in New Zealand documented the animal appearing to give off electric shocks when touched, and it remains unclear whether the giant oarfish shares this capacity. A glowing, shimmering, apparently electrifying sea creature that appears before earthquakes and vanishes without explanation into black water would inspire legends in any culture on Earth. What science has done over the past 2 decades is begin to separate the biological reality from the accumulated mythology. And what that reality reveals, when examined without the lens of legend, is something arguably more remarkable than any sea monster story. As recent events in 2024 and 2025 have demonstrated, even the scientific community is still finding out things about this animal that no one expected. What science has recently revealed and what remains unsolved. For most of the 20th century, the oarfish was a scientific curiosity whose study depended almost entirely on chance. A specimen would wash ashore, be examined quickly before decomposition set in, and a few notes would be added to the slim body of knowledge about the species. The turn of the 21st century brought the first video of a live oarfish, and subsequent decades brought improved technology in the form of remotely operated vehicles capable of reaching the mesopelagic zone. But the pace of discovery has accelerated noticeably in the period from 2019 onward, and what researchers have found has complicated and enriched the picture of the oarfish in equal measure. In 2019, a breakthrough came in understanding oarfish reproduction that science had never achieved before. Researchers performed the first successful artificial insemination on a pair of mature oarfish specimens obtained from a stranding event, and for the first time ever, the progression from fertilized egg to larva was documented in a laboratory setting, with eggs hatching after approximately 18 days into larvae that appeared similar to those of other lampridiform species, providing the first direct evidence of early oarfish development. Before that experiment, virtually everything science believed about oarfish reproduction was inferred from related species. The actual progression of their early life had never been witnessed. That same year, 2019, genetic science added another landmark to oarfish research. The first complete mitochondrial genome sequencing of the giant oarfish was accomplished in 2019, a development that clarified its phylogenetic position within the Lampriformes order and improved scientific understanding of the evolutionary relationships among ribbon-like deep-sea fishes. Genome sequencing allows researchers to trace how a species is related to others, how long ago lineages diverged, and what biological traits are ancient versus recently evolved. For an animal as poorly understood as the oarfish, having this genetic baseline is significant. The years 2024 and 2025 brought a cluster of new strandings that gave researchers more material to work with than any comparable recent period.
Imagine being in the water and stumbling upon a massive and rare 12-foot sea creature. That's what happened to a group of snorkelers and kayakers at La Jolla Cove.
In August 2024, a 12-foot specimen was found dead at La Jolla Cove in California. And just months later, in November 2024, an approximately 10-foot oarfish washed ashore near Encinitas, also in California, with both specimens being necropsied to study the species' biology in detail. The Birch Aquarium at Scripps put the La Jolla specimen on educational display, using the moment of public fascination to highlight what is and is not known about deep-sea biodiversity. Then, in February 2025, something happened that the scientific record had never previously documented in quite the same way. A live oarfish was recorded on video swimming in the shallow coastal waters of Baja California Sur along Mexico's Pacific coast, and beachgoers who witnessed the event physically assisted the animal back into deeper water, offering a rare direct observation of a living, moving oarfish in distress in a shallow environment. Videos from that encounter circulated widely, giving the general public their clearest close-up look at a living giant oarfish in a natural setting. The animal's silver body, crimson dorsal crest, and distinctive rippling motion of the dorsal fin were all clearly visible in the footage. Also in 2025, a study documented the first recorded oarfish in Sri Lanka, a 2.6-meter specimen of Regalecus russelli caught off the western coast in October 2021 and only formally reported that year, expanding known information about the species' range in the northern Indian Ocean. That same year, in the southern hemisphere, 3 strandings occurred in quick succession, 1 on Tasmania's west coast and 2 in New Zealand within weeks of each other, an unusual clustering in southern waters that researchers noted for further analysis. DNA samples taken from the 2024 California strandings have been used to conduct population genetics research, with scientists using the material to explore genetic diversity and evolutionary relationships within the Regalecidae family, the kind of research that was simply impossible before intact tissue became available. Each stranding, while it represents the death of an individual animal, provides tools for understanding the species as a whole in ways that were previously out of reach. What remains unsolved is a list long enough to fill its own volume. The lifespan of the oarfish is completely unknown. No reliable method of aging an oarfish has been established, because the usual indicators used for other fish species, such as growth rings in otoliths, have not been successfully applied to this species. The full global population size is unknown and likely unknowable with current technology. Scientific assessments indicate a very low vulnerability profile based on slow population growth rates, with population doubling times estimated to exceed 14 years. But no comprehensive global population estimate exists. According to National Geographic, the oarfish has tubercles and a silvery coat of guanine, and although it is adapted to survive under high pressure, at the surface, its skin is soft and easily damaged. A reminder that this creature is engineered for a world humans have barely begun to access. The more science learns about the oarfish, the clearer it becomes that the ocean's twilight zone still holds answers to questions researchers have not yet thought to ask. The oarfish is not normal. Scientist after scientist who has examined the species has come to that same conclusion. What is becoming increasingly clear is that its abnormality is not a collection of quirks. It is a sophisticated, coherent suite of adaptations built for life in one of the most extreme environments on the planet. A world of no light, immense pressure, scarce food, and almost no predators. Everything about the oarfish makes sense in that context, even if it makes no sense at all from the surface. Consider the sensory architecture for a moment. The oarfish possesses a lateral line system running the full length of the body, made up of neuromasts that detect hydrodynamic vibrations and subtle pressure changes from distant movements in the water, an essential navigation and prey detection tool in an environment where vision is almost useless. In the mesopelagic zone, sound and pressure are the primary carriers of information. The oarfish's ability to detect the tiny disturbances created by a cloud of krill hovering dozens of feet away could make the difference between feeding and starving in a place where food is sparse and scattered. The eyes are another underappreciated part of the puzzle. Though small relative to the animal's massive overall size, the eyes are positioned to perceive the faint bioluminescent glow of organisms in the dim mesopelagic zone, as well as the residual downwelling light that trickles in from the surface far above. The ability to see in almost complete darkness and to distinguish the silhouette of a potential meal against the faint glow of a twilight ocean is a significant biological investment for an animal that otherwise appears almost passive in its feeding style. It is also worth noting what the oarfish's orange or red-colored liver tells scientists about its diet and biochemistry. The liver of Regalecus glesni is typically orange or red in color, which researchers attribute to the presence of astaxanthin, a carotenoid pigment derived from eating krill and other crustaceans, the same pigment that gives salmon their pink flesh and flamingos their pink feathers. In a fish that consumes thousands of individual krill in a single feeding session, astaxanthin accumulates in the organ most responsible for processing nutrients and filtering the blood. The orange liver is therefore a direct biochemical record of the oarfish's dietary habits, a window into a feeding ecology otherwise difficult to observe. The oarfish's liver also highlights one more thing that science still cannot explain: why the flesh is inedible. Despite being the largest bony fish on Earth, the oarfish has never been eaten with any pleasure by any culture that has tried it. The flesh is described uniformly as gelatinous, flabby, and gooey, with a consistency that makes it unsuitable for commercial fishing or traditional food culture in any region of the world. For a deep-sea animal of this size, that gelatinous composition may be an adaptation to the pressure of its environment, keeping cellular structures from compressing or deforming under the immense weight of the water column above. But whatever the biological reason, the result is an animal that is enormous, globally distributed, occasionally visible, and yet effectively outside the entire human food system, something that has almost certainly contributed to its survival despite millennia of coastal human populations. Science in 2026 knows significantly more about the oarfish than it did at the turn of the century, and yet the list of confirmed facts about this species still fits comfortably in a short document. What the last decade of strandings, genome sequencing, and laboratory reproduction research has done is reveal not just facts about the animal, but the shape of what remains unknown. The oarfish is not simply a fish that has not yet been fully studied. It is a fish that has actively resisted being studied, living in conditions designed to keep it out of human reach, appearing on shore only when something has gone badly wrong, and refusing to survive in captivity long enough for extended observation. The animal itself has never cooperated. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.